Hey guys, JHoyt here. Before this one gets started, I just want to say thank you guys so much for all of the support. Yesterday's video, when we previewed the Seattle expansion draft and kind of predicted our own team, we had tons of views, tons of watch time, all in the first day. So thank you guys so much for that. But this time we're recapping it. What actually happened? How many of them picks did we get right? Let's find out. What's on, guys? JHoyt back with you today. Welcome back to yet another NHL video. I know we've had a lot of NHL recently, but we have some big events that have happened, and obviously I want to cover them. So yesterday for all of us was the Seattle expansion draft. And we made a prediction video of who we thought the picks were gonna be, and yeah, that one didn't go too great for us. So if you guys missed it, the picks are gonna be on your screen now. And yeah, this was a very interesting one. As you can look down through this list, there is a kind of a theme that went on with most of this list, that a lot of good young players, under like 26, 27 years old, and even some good young prospects and undervalued players. It was a very interesting way that the Seattle staff, put this roster together. So let's go through it, right? If you look at my picks versus the actual picks, we went 5 for 30. Yeah, I'm not sure what percentage that is, but 5 for 30. Not the greatest of picks. So I know Seattle went in a different order than what we're going to be going through it with, but we're going to go right down alphabetically down through all the teams. So first one is actually correct. Our first pick was Hayden Fleury from Anaheim. We got that one correct, right? Good young left-handed defenseman, former Carolina draft pick. So that's probably why Ron Francis was pretty high on him. But next one, Christian Fischer from Arizona. It was my pick. Ended up being Tyler Pitlick, another forward from them that has kind of found his role, I guess, if you will, finally on that on the lower lines in the bottom six. And there's also word right now that he might be getting traded anyway. So don't really know where that's gonna go on. But the next pick was actually kind of interesting, right? Because there was a couple players available from Boston that would have been, probably above this one. But I ended up picking Andre Kasha, right? Good young, like 20, I think he's like 25-year-old right wing scoring winger, I should say. And they end up going with Jeremy Lauzon, another good young left-handed defenseman. So so far you got two good young defensemen and kind of like a fourth line depth, bottom six player. Next pick from Buffalo was Will Borgen. I probably pronounced that one wrong, but he is, I think, another good young defenseman if I remember correctly. But we end up picking Colin Miller, right? I feel like a good right-hand defenseman that could already play on your top line or even second line, or definitely in the NHL. I thought would have been a pretty hot topic for them. But they end up going with Borgen there, or Borgon, or however you pronounce it. They end up going with him. Next pick from Seattle was Calgary, and it was their captain, Mark Giordano. I think it was 15 years or something like that in the Calgary organization. I'm not sure how much of it's been as captain, but this one was actually a very surprising pick. Now, we end up picking Oliver Killington, a good young defenseman, but this one was surprising, right? Giordano's like 37 years old, and it is good, yes, but it doesn't really go with the theme of what they kind of brought through the rest of these players. Like, none of these other players, I believe, are 30 plus years old. So it was really kind of surprising that they would pick a 37-year-old defenseman. So I don't know if there's gonna be any trades involved, but he was at the expansion draft, so it looks like he's gonna stick around for at least this next year, because I think he has 1 year left on that contract. But our next pick from Carolina was Morgan Geekie, and another good young forward in this case. And we ended up picking Nino Niederreiter, which again was a could be on your top line scoring winger. And they end up going with the youth, right? They went with a prospect, not necessarily a prospect, but a good young up-and-coming player instead of a player in the NHL that, could get you, some pretty good success right away. So, again, very interesting. Obviously, Carolina is a team that Ron Francis knows very well. Former was at GM there and knows a lot of these players, really well. So, very interesting pick by them, but obviously they know that organization pretty well. But down to Chicago. Now, this is where I thought they were going to take Nikita Zadorov as their pick, but they ended up going with a different option, and John Quenneville, who's a younger player, still trying to figure out where he fits in on an NHL roster, but semi-young, former first-round pick from the Devils. That it was a very surprising pick when they announced that. I thought they would go with someone a little bit more notable than that, but I guess they kind of filled up their roster with some other players. Down to Colorado, our second pick that we got right, Jonas Donskoy, an underrated player. He does play a very interesting role. He's not a superstar by any means, but he definitely fits in, next to superstars, and he's more of like a winger, two-way guy that does a little bit of everything, and definitely shows up when the time comes. And I finally got a second one right. I mean, there's a lot of players that you could have picked from there. I know Gabriel Landeskog was available, but he's a UFA, so they got Donskoy. It was a great pick. Very happy to see that Seattle thought as highly as I did about him. But we move on because that's only our second pick that we've gotten right. The next pick from the Columbus Blue Jackets was a very surprising one. Gavin Bayreuther. I'm just going to go with that. I'm probably butchered. I'm sorry, Gavin. But everyone thought they were going to pick Max Domi. I don't know where this pick came from. I'm going to be honest. Again, we're going to find out all the trades tonight at the draft, I believe. I think tonight's the draft. Might be wrong. But we're going to find out a lot of those trades today. So maybe there was a trade involved. Not exactly sure. But very surprised they didn't take Max Domi there. Our next pick from the Dallas Stars. Not the Empire, like I said in the first video. But I thought they were going to take Julius Honka, a good young right-hand defenseman that is struggling to find his way in the NHL. But they ended up going with Jamie Oleksiak. I believe he was a UFA, and he signed a big extension. I think like $4-point-something million for like 4 or 5 years or something like that. So big contract from Oleksiak. The big 6'7" defenseman from there obviously stands up for his teammates and everything. So pretty good pickup by them. Not often you get a big 6'7" defenseman that is worth much of anything other than like Zdeno Chara. But very interesting pick there. But down to Detroit, we end up picking Evgeny Svechnikov. Good young winger that's, again, trying to find his way and try to figure out where he fits in. But they end up going with Dennis Cholowski, another young defenseman, which is, again, very interesting from Seattle, right? A lot of these teams had good players that were available, and instead they chose to go with some unorthodox picks. So very interesting to see. But down to the Edmonton Oilers, right? We picked Dominic Cahoon, right? Good young winger that can move up and down the lineup. And they ended up going with Adam Larson. So there was rumors that Larson wasn't going to be signed by Edmonton, or at least, the contract was still a little bit off. Now Edmonton shifts their focus to Tyson Barrie, and I know they've been looking at a couple of their players as well. But they end up selecting Larson and signing him to a contract for like 4 years at like $4 or $5 million or something like that. So again, good pickup, right? I think he's like about 30 years old or so, and a good pick, right? Good young right-hand not young, but good right-hand defenseman that can play pretty much any role on your team. Our next pick from the Florida Panthers, and our third pick we got right. Chris Driedger, he was a UFA, ends up signing a 3-year deal at like $3.5 million. It's great to see, right? I get another pick right, and they get a good goaltender that has shown in the last like year or two that he's capable of playing at the NHL level. So hopefully that works out for him. Hopefully they don't waste a ton of money on him. But again, third one right, so I'm pretty happy about that one. Our next pick from the LA Kings, I end up going with Austin Wagner, fourth line, big tough guy. They end up going with a good young big defenseman in Curtis McDermott. We had a close, similarity of who we picked, but not necessarily the same person. But good pick from them, right? Big. I think it's like 6'5" or something like that, defenseman. So hopefully he works out there. Our next pick from Minnesota, this one I thought would have been pretty obvious, getting Kaapo Kähkönen, which is what we end up going with as a goalie. But instead they go with Carson Soucy, which I believe is another big defenseman that has recently come in and done some pretty big work for them. But again, very interesting to see it. They didn't go with a good young goalie, but again, that might be where a trade came in and changed the pick. So again, very interesting pick from Seattle. But we move on to our second half of our team. So we do have a set of brothers on this roster that apparently haven't played together since they were just wee little kids. And our next pick from the Montreal Canadiens is Cale Fleury, right, brother of Hayden Fleury, who went from from Anaheim. So Cale Fleury gets picked in this one. Good pick, right? Good young right-hand defenseman. Recently made his NHL debut, I think was it last year, and has shown some pretty big promise, like 22 years old. So a great pickup by Seattle from Montreal. We end up going with Jonathan Drouin, but again, this is another one where they get someone good and young in this deal. Next pick down to Nashville. We picked Ryan Johansson, right? Still good, somewhat young, I think he's like 28 years old. Has a big contract, but this would have gave them a #1 center right away, no question about it. But this one, they actually go a little bit of a different route. They go down to Nashville and pick Calle Jarnkrok. And again, this might be where there's a trade involved. Not exactly sure, but Calle Jarnkrok, don't know really too much about him, but I know he plays in that like third or fourth line role. And I think he was a former first-round pick, if I remember correctly. But a very interesting pick, right? Out of the bigger names that were available, I'm surprised they didn't go with them. But again, maybe there's a trade involved. Down to the New Jersey Devils, though. We had Will Butcher on our board. They ended up going with Nathan Bastian, right? Big young right, or I guess forward, I'll call him. That can move up and down the lineup, play in a lot of situations, and a very interesting pick, right? Just signed an extension with the Devils this offseason, I should say. I think it was like a 2-year deal, so a great pickup by them. Should be competing for NHL spot. We move down to the Islanders. Now, I think in the video I said I'd probably go with Jordan Eberle, but in this time I'm going to pick a younger forward. I think it was something along those lines, which I could have been right? They end up picking Jordan Eberle, and it was a great pickup, right? Good former, was it first overall? I don't remember exactly, but definitely first-round pick from the Edmonton Oilers. Goes over the Islanders. Still is one of their best players there, and we end up going with Kiefer Bellows, and good young pick, right? But nope, they go with the experienced winger, good scoring winger from the Islanders. But from the Rangers, right? This is where I thought that Tony DeAngelo would have gone, and they would have had a really good right-hand defenseman that did have some problems last year, but could have been a really big part of their team. But instead, they go with Colin Blackwell. Now, I wasn't too big on this pick, but I know Rangers fans are pretty upset about it. Obviously, they viewed him pretty highly on their squad, and could have been very interesting. They didn't take someone like DeAngelo, especially when the Rangers are probably already looking for a trade and or to buy him out, or just try to get him off their team. Basically in this sense. The next pickup, though, from the Ottawa Senators, we went with a goalie in Matt Murray. They went with a goalie in Joey Daccord, a good young goaltender, up and coming. Has dealt with injuries, trying to battle back from that. So we were right in goaltender, but we weren't right in who they actually picked. But that's tough to see. But we did get it right. At least they took a goalie from them. But next down to the Philadelphia Flyers. We picked Shane Gostisbehere to be picked in this one. They end up going Carson Tawinski. I think that I butchered that one probably. But interesting is just prior to me making this video, Gostisbehere ended up getting traded to the Arizona Coyotes with a couple of draft picks for, I believe it's future considerations. I I think they just view that as a cap dump more than anything. But, you know, interesting to see as a player that's still doing okay in the NHL. There's not many picks left as we go down to the Pittsburgh Penguins. We end up picking Jason Zucker. They go the player that's similar. I think we went back and forth between these two players in the initial video. But they end up taking Brandon Tanev. We went with Zucker. Basically the same player down there on those bottom 6 lines. But it was tough. But again, really good pick from Seattle. Our next pickup from the San Jose Sharks. We end up picking Ryan Donato. The Seattle Kraken end up picking Alexander True. I don't know too much about this player other than he's a forward, and I think he's somewhat young. But yeah, we were wrong. But you know, Donato would have given them a good younger forward that could have been a pretty big piece of their team. But either way, we move down to the St. Louis Blues. Now this one I thought was a sure, clear-cut, obvious, blatant, no questions about it pick. I thought they were going to pick Vlad Tarasenko, but they didn't, right? They end up going to the defensive side and picking up Vince Dunn. I'm pretty sure I said if it's not Tarasenko, then Dunn would probably be the one. But down to the Stanley Cup champions. We went with Alex Killorn in this one. I thought it was going to be a pretty straightforward pick, but there was a group of, 4 or 5 players that could have been picked, right? A lot of good forwards that could have been really beneficial for Seattle to take. They end up going with the other one that I was going to pick originally in Yanni Gourde, a player that can play a little bit of everything, provides a little bit of everything, and will overall be a good pickup if he continues up what he's been doing in Tampa Bay over in Seattle. But down to the Toronto Maple Leafs. This man did not stay in this place for long, as Jared McCann just got traded from Pittsburgh to Toronto, and he ends up getting taken by Seattle. And this one was our 4th pick that we got right. And I knew a lot of these picks, weren't going to be right, but I wasn't expecting only 5 in total. But either way, good pickup by them. Still finding his way, filled in on the second line when there's injuries in Pittsburgh, and actually did pretty well. But down to Vancouver, we have another pick that was very close, again, that was very similar. We end up going with Jake Virtanen, right, former 6th overall pick, still finding his way in the NHL. Seattle ends up going with Cole Lind, another good right-hand good right-handed right winger that, is still, again, finding his way, 22 years old, so he's still good and young, and, still finding his way. But we go down to our last 2 picks. We got the Washington Capitals and Winnipeg. Let's start with Washington. Washington ends up losing Vitek Vanacek. I'm going to go with that, or Vanacek. I'm not exactly sure. But again, a goaltender that made a pretty good run with their team. They end up keeping Samsonov on their team, but they pick Vanacek. We end up picking Nick Jensen, a defenseman, but hey, can't always get them all right. But Vanacek going over there probably have a little bit of a tandem with Driedger, and depending on what Secord does, we'll see how that ends up working out. But Vanacek and Driedger, 2 underrated players that have recently made a big impact. And our last and final pick of the expansion draft, and our 5th and final player that we ended up getting right from the Winnipeg Jets, right wing Mason Appleton. We kind of figured this one out pretty early on, although there was rumors that he was going to be the 1 pick. So we ended up going with him. We took the safe bet, and Appleton should be a pleasant surprise if he does show up in Seattle and perform how everyone thinks he's going to do. But we're going to find out lots of trades and everything, and all the considerations of all these teams to stay away from certain players or to pick certain players. But that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy, hit that like button down below if you haven't yet, or if you're brand new here, make sure to subscribe, turn those post notifications on so you never miss an upload, and don't forget, you can always change your mind later. But with all that being said, guys, we'll see you in the next one.